And now we have another presentation that we would like to make of another dynamic duo of Jessica Bazard and Erica Bissell are going to talk about our early learning centers and some of the work that's been going on with that, and provide you an update with kind of where we are. And I'm going to not step on your presentation and turn it over to you two.
I'm going to prepare you that ours is not as dynamic as Dr. Speece. We have no videos. We don't have cute children. We're not there yet. We haven't opened the centers, so we don't have any pictures yet. But we were asked by Dr. Little and Dr. Talley to provide an update on a timeline for the early childhood centers in both Gilbert and Pillion, and kind of to explain the research that's being done to ensure that we open centers that are exemplary and that provide yet another opportunity and destination for families to have, to Dr. Guyton's point, amazing early childhood opportunities for students that not only are maybe being phased out of what's offered by government and by federal assistance, but also for all kids to have early childhood experiences. And we're going to show some reasons why that's so important on the next slide. So we're gonna kind of just ping pong back and forth, but why early childhood? There's consensus amongst the fields, several fields, that early childhood experiences and the experiences, especially between ages 0 and 5, have an enormous impact on a child's opportunity to thrive for the rest of his or her life. And so we talk a lot about when kids come to us in kindergarten, but by then we already have students that have deficits. We really need to focus on birth throughout our public school system, but between birth and age 5 is where a substantial amount of growth is happening. And if we don't have our hands in that, again, when they come to us in kindergarten, we are starting at a deficit, and it's going to take years and years to make up and close that gap.
Also, the early childhood years, specifically birth to age 8, is so important for laying the foundation for what's going to happen for the rest of a child's life. And so, again, like Erica said, we have to have our hand in that, and we need to grow that based on what we're currently offering in Lexington 1. And then also, the third bullet, this is really a crisis across the country. The lack of high quality, specifically affordable childcare for families is a major crisis for working and middle class families, and we want to be able to help support that.
And you've seen me come to y'all to present Read to Succeed updates. And when I'm talking about third grade retention, it's because kids didn't have early child experiences in a lot of cases. They didn't not have reading proficiency just when they started third grade. There were gaps that had been created ever since birth. And so if we do our job and do early intervention and provide early childhood services, which are beyond just academic services, and we'll talk a little bit about that too, then we can substantially decrease the amount of kids that we're talking about that are in retention, potentially even special services, and then retention, we could wipe it off of the map as far as even being something that we need to discuss. Even though we love our summer camps, Mr. Anderson, we would be able to do it for different reasons, not just to close those gaps that weren't fulfilled when children were young. So there's also a need to provide high quality early learning services that demonstrate a commitment to equitable outcomes for all children. So not only is high quality a key issue, but also equitable opportunity. And so right now we have systems where if you can afford a high quality early childhood experience, then your child will get a high quality early childhood experience. If you can't, then the choices sometimes are of a lesser quality, and sometimes it's not an option at all, because the only thing that is available is something that is less equitable in nature as far as both academics, social, emotional development, et cetera. And also literacy and numeracy would be a part of this. So you usually see me talking about literacy, but this would include child having early numeracy experiences and just early life experiences, being talked to, being exposed to things. And so we want to kind of harness all of this information that we have and provide opportunities in both Pillion and Gilbert to increase the number of opportunities, the quality of the opportunities, and to ensure the equitable experience of all students in Lexington 1. And then the last data point that we want to talk about for why early childhood is actually right here at home data right here from Lexington 1. For the past 3 years, we've been giving a state kindergarten readiness assessment, which is part of Read to Succeed. It's a requirement statewide. And our data here in Lexington 1 shows that 66% on average over the last 3 years of our students entering kindergarten were not ready for kindergarten. And again, that has nothing to do with our kindergarten programs. This is kids coming ready. So we test them within the first 45 days of school, and we test them in specific areas to include literacy, numeracy, social emotional development, and physical development. And so 66%. Now, those aren't the kinds of numbers we're used to seeing in Lexington 1. And so we do a really good job closing those gaps based on our data as we move forward. But just think about if we could have hands-on experiences with those kids earlier, how much of the gap we could close before then they're ready for kindergarten. Because as soon as they enter a grade not ready, just think about, we want a year's worth of growth. If you're starting already behind, that year's growth, to close that gap is going to take acceleration. And acceleration is this thing that we struggle with because of the amount of instructional hours that we have with kids. There's just not enough time in the day and a time in the year to do the kind of work we need to do when we're talking about closing achievement gaps.
I'll be honest, Dr. Bissell, I was really surprised by that number. And so you said that's in the last 3 years?
It's an average over the last 3 years.
Prior to that, what kind of numbers did we have?
So we didn't have an assessment
Okay.
tool, and in kindergarten, we didn't have anything that really assessed readiness. So we have assessments once they've been with us for a quarter in kindergarten or a semester in kindergarten. But this is really assessing, and we tell our kindergarten teachers, this is not what you've done with the children, and that's why we encourage them to give the assessment as soon as possible. This is to really determine, are the children prime for the kindergarten experience?
Is anybody working with, I know there's just some phenomenal kindergarten programs in our community. They've been around, 40 and 50 years, some of them.
Preschool programs, you mean?
Yes. Does anybody ever work with them? Because maybe they don't know where those children should be and where the standards
Right.
should be.
Right, so we have plans to visit those centers in the community and invite them in for professional learning to show them what kinds of experiences we need kids to come to kindergarten with.
Okay.
So
Sounds great.
future plans. Yeah.
And that's all in the effort to have a collaboration, not to say you need to do it our way, but so we can learn from them and they can learn from us and we can all be going after the same thing. All right, so all of the really important stuff aside, the why, here's kind of the brass tacks of what we're going to go after in the next few years as we prepare to open these centers. So this year, we're kind of in the research phase. We're looking at building designs. And so just as a reminder, we will be looking at 2 of our existing buildings, the current Gilbert Elementary School, repurposing that for the Gilbert Early Childhood Center, and then we'll be looking at the current Pillion Middle School and repurposing that for the Pillion Early Childhood Center. So in order to do that, we want to make sure that we're making really sound building design decisions. And so we're using a lot of opportunity to visit places both virtually and in person. We're trying to learn as much as we can so we can, as Dr. Little says, measure twice and cut once. We don't want to, nailed it, right? We don't want to go in and have what we think is a grand plan and then get halfway through and decide, oh wait, that's not going to work for these little ones. And we're talking about everything from the size of where everything is matters. There's a lot of things we need to consider when we're repurposing buildings that haven't been used for this in the past. So we're really doing a lot of research around building design. Programming needs, we want the space to be outfitted appropriately to fulfill the programming needs that we know that these children need to have experiences with. We also are looking at a potential museum-like space where we can have not only traditional academic experiences for kids, but also enrichment experiences and experiences that they may not have if we didn't have this museum-like experience for them in district and on site. And so we will be coming with a lot more information about that as this timeline and the planning expands. And then we also are looking at a parenting center expansion. So we have a parenting center in the heart of Lexington at our AES facility. And we, based on a lot of conversation that Ms. Bizard has had with the parenting center, we think that they are an untapped resource and that they are not hitting all ends of the community, and we need to provide those resources to all of our families. And so we need to look and see if the Pillion Center and the Gilbert Center might be places where we can expand those services. And then we're also going to be proposing in the budget for this coming year an additional FTE for 4K at Centerville and at what will become Gilbert Elementary School, so that we can serve an additional 40 4K students. Because again, we have waiting lists for 4K, so that tells you that people are looking for high quality early childhood experiences and they're not finding what they're looking for, and they're on our waiting list, and we have a high demand and we don't have enough resources to fulfill the need.
All right, so that was what we're working on currently. So for next school year, 2020, 2021, and we've gotten really, really good at saying 2020, 2021. We're going to continue researching the programming needs and the potential for the museum-like space in terms of the programming. So this year we're researching additional curriculum for 4K to match what experience they're getting in 5K. So that, again, kids can be ready for kindergarten, and we decrease that 66% we don't like to see earlier. We're also piloting a preschool inclusion initiative. So this means that approximately half of a classroom would be students with IEPs, and the other half of the classroom would be general ed children. We want to, and we're working with the State Department to do that. So there's a preschool inclusion initiative across the state, and we've joined that this year. So we're just in the early stages of that. So we'll continue that next year. We want to, next year we're going to finalize the building design for what we're hoping for the building, and start to renovate the current Gilbert Elementary campus. And also the what Ms. Smith spoke to earlier, the community engagement. We're going to start hosting those meetings where we're bringing in child care professionals that are currently serving children that we aren't able to currently serve, so that we can connect the dots for those pieces.
And our community engagement will also include parents and the Gilbert community and the Pillion community as we move forward to Pillion, to ensure that that we're offering the type of services that they feel that the community needs and the community may be lacking, or that they're having to go too far to have a certain service. Is there a possibility that the Early Childhood Center can provide some of those resources so that they bring them closer to home? So those community engagement meetings will be multifaceted, face-to-face, and will be a kind of bring everybody to the table type experience. And then in 2021, 2022, if you can even believe it. Yes. Well, we wanted to open it next year, but we thought that might be too soon. So continue renovations of the current GES campus, present staffing proposal and budget needs for Gilbert Early Childhood Center, which will open in, ta-da-da, August of 2022. So in August 2022, we will plan to open Gilbert Attendance Area Early Childhood Center, and then a year later, using everything that we've learned. So Gilbert is going to be the lead in this project, but we hope to take everything that we've learned and accelerate the process for Pillion, knowing that everything that we put in Gilbert, the research outside of the community input, that could be very different, and we want to honor the input of each community independently, in case so that we know that they may have different needs. But exclusive of that, the research should guide the development and the renovations and the building design and the programming needs in both early childhood centers. So then in 2023, how many of us will still be here in 2023? Pillion Attendance Area Early Childhood Center opens, and we are very excited, and we want to have centers that are second to none in the state, because we don't do anything less than Lexington One, and we dramatically want to reduce that 66% in collaboration with all of those birth to 5 providers, to include our pediatricians, to include our community providers, our public libraries. Everybody has a stake in this game, and we want to bring everybody to the table so that we can give the best beginning to our children.
The conference that Ms. Smith and I went to last week, just turn myself off, it's our legislative advocacy conference, and it's kind of anticipating legislative needs and priorities for this coming session. And there were two panels. There was a panel on Saturday that was legislators, and it was our own Paula Calhoun was there, and she's been on in the House for a year. And then there was Jerry Govan, who I think has been serving since maybe the early 90s. But all four of the legislators, it's the first time since I've been going that all four of them, and they're different, both sides of the aisle, talked about that the focus needs to be on early education. And then, and it was really good to hear them that they just kept agreeing and emphasizing that. And then on Sunday, our panel was education advocacy lobbyists. Kathy Manus was there, and SEEA, the SCAZA, Pam Mills was there, Lisa Ellis from SE for Ed. And they also all were echoing that priority. So I think it finally seems that people have realized that for South Carolina, the education question, that's the answer. And I thought it was so good. I think it was maybe Lisa Ellis was the one. I thought this was just a brilliant idea. With Read to Succeed, that requirement, which seems like a good idea on paper to a legislator that's not a classroom teacher, that every certified teacher has to take a literacy class, that instead take those funds and put it into early education. And what a leapfrog that would give us in being able to fund what everybody sees as a priority. So I think y'all are doing, amazing work. And I think that you're going to be at the front of what's a tidal wave in this, because I think these efforts are coming, and I think people have realized that South Carolina needs this. Lexington One is fortunate in that we have leaders and the opportunity to do this for our students, but there are a lot of communities that don't. And it's just so vital, because you're right.
We're also blessed that our community voted on the bond referendum, and they're supporting this.
Well, and I can't imagine on the kindergarten readiness assessment in Lexington 1 that 66% are not ready. I cannot imagine in areas of our state where there are no pre-K options, how those students, how far behind they're starting. I just cannot possibly imagine that. So hopefully advocacy efforts will really help you out, and maybe the funds will come too to make this a little bit easier. But I'm really excited about this.
Great, thank you. It is definitely the conversation, and we appreciate the leadership that's supporting the effort. Anything else?
I just want to say thank you. You know how wonderful I think all of this is, and I've been on board with you for a couple of years. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Why are you only requesting one full-time position in Gilbert at Centerville and one at Gilbert Elementary?
Yep.
Because I understand there's a pretty long waiting list. I'm just wondering why you aren't requesting more.
There is a waiting list, so we were charged with thinking about how we could start to expand that next year, and so that it's not such a huge hit in 1 year when we open the Early Childhood Center. So we proposed to add 1.0 FTE, but that will serve 40 students. So it would be a half-day program, which would move approximately. So on average, there's anywhere from 60 to 80 kids that are on the waiting list, and those come and go depending upon, transient families, et cetera. But by doing 2 half-day programs, that would move, 2/3 of those children off of the waiting list for 4K. So how it would shake out would be at Centerville, there would be 1 full-time, 2 full-time teachers. One would be full day, and that teacher would serve 20 children. The other teacher would be half-day teacher, and she would serve 40 children. And then the same would be true at Gilbert Elementary. A 1.0 full-day FTE and a 1.0 half-day FTE.
Well, until the legislature catches up at the state and federal level, it's increasing millage to our businesses. So I think that's the balancing act we have to do as a board, is deciding how much we want to raise taxes. Which again, I think the program everyone's in support of is just making it fiscally responsible.
Absolutely.
And I do think there's some downstream opportunity cost of doing this. So my hope is that the cost of these students in first, second, and third grade is actually less. So we would regain some of the expenses.
Exactly.
But my guess is it's not a 1-for-1 in return.
Not yet.
Yeah.
It could be if we can close the gap significantly
Well,
enough that interventions and
Yeah.
some other of the outside supports that we're putting some financial support towards we would hope that we would be able to offset some of those needs and be
Right.
able to put those needs then in a different area. So it's, you have to give something, to get something, but we can definitely also provide a phase-in plan. So what it would require to move all kids off the waiting list, what it would require to move, we also have space issues. So there are some.
That was my question, yeah.
We'd like to do it all, but there are a lot of cost benefit that we have to weigh, but we'd be happy to provide any plan that you would like to look at and then make the decision that's best for the district in all
Absolutely.
areas.
Just a hypothetical, do you think if you did something that phased in, that moved everybody off the waiting list, that more people would say, hey, there's no waiting list, and sign up? I mean,
One thing that we want to go after, and Ms. Bizarre's working with Ms. Hill, is communication. So we do think there's a lot of folks, and Dr. Guyton kind of already set us up for this perfectly, who don't know about our programs.
Right.
And so the more FaceTime it gets, we think we will continue to have people come and say, oh, I didn't even know. A lot of times it's through siblings or through family members. Oh, my child participated in 4K. Oh, I didn't know Lexington had 4K. So it's communication. So yeah, I don't know that we would ever be able to eliminate the waiting list or fulfill all the need, which is kind of a good problem to have. Sorry, it's kind of a good problem to have. But again, I think we can continue to go after giving as many opportunities as possible with the hopes that the better the program, the more people will seek the opportunity.
Is it still would it primarily be needs-based or?
So currently it is needs-based.
right.
Most of our programs are needs-based. We do have a few tuition-based programs that are not needs-based. And so we would like to have more opportunities across the board.
So the funding that we receive is EIA funding, and it states that those funds are used based on need, specifically based on poverty levels of the family. And we like to think about, I'm not sure which one of you said this earlier, but when we're thinking about, well, I think it was you, Dr. Powers, when you were saying it's going to prevent a lot of problems later, right? So prevention instead of retention and instead of intervention, which is what we're doing a lot of now. We're playing a lot of catch up, which is what Erica spoke to earlier. So hopefully increasing the opportunities. And then as far as the cost factor, some states have adopted universal pre-K. And until we adopt universal pre-K, we're always going to have a waiting list and be trying to, try to catch up.
We have to use the funds as they are allocated. So currently, the majority of the funds for early childhood are based on a needs.
So
frame.
where we can, to match two cohorts, that over a 3 to 5 year period, we could make a value proposition to tell this story would be good.
Yes.
So
And we'd also like to look at, and we're working with Dr. Phillips on a half day versus full day. I mean, there's lots of things, because if you go to full day, which we, just on a novice end, think is better for kids, and there is research to support it, but that increases the number of FTE, because now a teacher that serves 40 can only serve 20. But we also think that's a better experience for kids. So we need to do some comparisons and talk about all the possibilities. Because again, if we're going to do it, we need to do it right, and we need to do it at Lexington 1 standard, which is nothing less than the best.
Yeah, I think I would certainly echo some of the sentiment of the board that I would expect a hockey-like graph in terms of interest, because when you're in the community, and I've never met a lottery winner, but when their child gets into a pre-K program at Lexington 1, it is as if they have won the lottery. And so it's complete celebratory. And so this will certainly feed more of that, but I would expect to see so just be prepared.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else?
All I can say is go and grow.
Thank you. And we'll be back in April with another update.
There are so many exciting opportunities with early childhood, and good stuff. It's good stuff.